Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia. That is Mike Tagliere, and it's you. And we're talking AFC South today. And in case you haven't noticed lately, we're giving you more podcasts. Basically, a podcast a day keeps the doctor away. And what we're doing is giving you shorter formats, so maybe they're about 30 minutes or so instead of the hour-long stuff, but we're giving you more pods with more perspectives on more things because we love you, because we love our audience and we want to take care of you, and we just keep giving. That's what we do here, and Tags and I are going to go down south today in the AFC with a rookie quarterback who was 1-1 in the draft, a quarterback who we don't know if is going to play for his respective team at all this year, and two teams that have their sights set on making the playoffs. So, Tags, it's an interesting grouping in the AFC South this year, just kind of at that 50,000 feet level.
It really is, and it's like looking through these teams. It's some of the teams don't have a whole lot of players being drafted high. Some players are being drafted high, and it's like they're good football players, but are they going to be a bust? And just touching on each of these rosters is going to be a good exercise for us as analysts, because sometimes we don't get into the deeper dives of these teams, but just touching on them and saying, setting expectations as we go into the 2021 season and who's set up for failure, depending on their current ADP, who's set up for success, and all that other nonsense.
Well, in case you missed it, last week we did one of these too. We had Derek Brown on with Yates and myself, and we're going to be going through all the divisions, and like Tag said, this is one of my favorite things that I used to do all the time. Every offseason, we would do shows previewing the divisions because I feel like it's a useful exercise. Like Tags is saying, what's different year over year? What does this team look like? What does it look like in the division? And also kind of dig a little bit deeper into the depth of these teams too, which helps you in those deeper leagues that we talk about. So before we kind of kick things off here, I want to remind everybody we got a giveaway thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction. Autographed Calvin Ridley jersey. We have some time left for that here as we head towards the end of May. So go to fantasypros.com/contest, and all you got to do is get a screenshot of your review at Apple Podcasts or CastBox. You leave a review there, take that screenshot, go to fantasypros.com/contest, upload that. Boom, you are entered to win not only the Calvin Ridley jersey, but every other giveaway we do after that. Once again, thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction, so go get some free swag for goodness sake. That's what we want to do. Let's start with some swag here as well on the program today, and let's kick things off here, if we will, with, let's go with the Colts, because I think the Colts have the most to discuss, because Phillip Rivers came in last year, went from a terrible offensive line to a great offensive line, shook the dust off a little bit, and by about week 7 or so, started to look like a better version, and then it got to a very good place. Now look, defensively, still a good team. Offensively, now they got Carson Wentz, and they're taking over. He's back with Frank Reich, where he had his most success under his tutelage. He's back with a much better offensive line. It's night and day. And let's start with Carson Wentz, because we can't analyze anything else before we start there. Do you think that Carson Wentz is going to get back to that guy that we were talking about as potential league MVP, or has Carson Wentz's career already gone south for you, and pardon my awful pun?
That's funny. I didn't even catch it right away.
That's why I'm here. You come for the football, you stay for the dad jokes, Tags. That's what you do.
My brother keeps me on my toes with those things. But no, I mean, Carson Wentz was someone that when the Bears were rumored to be potentially trading for him, people asked me, do you want him? And honestly, for the cost that they got him, I'm fine with it. I think that it's not out of the question that they resurrect his career there in Indianapolis. Everything went south in Philly. It's a tough market to play in. The offensive line did go to crap, but when he had a good offensive line, which it was when healthy, he played extremely well, especially under Frank Reich. So I do think a bounce back is possible. Now, do I think that they want him throwing the ball 40 times per game? No, I think they want to base this around their rushing attack with Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack, Nyheim Hines. So do I think he's going to be a fantasy superstar? No, but do I believe that he could be someone that's teetering in that low-end QB1, high-end QB2 territory? Think of like a Ryan Tannehill type player where you're expecting higher efficiency. He's got some mobility to his game. I do believe that Carson Wentz is going to be someone that we're going to be continually talking about on the show as a potential streamer in good matchups. I don't think he's someone that you're going to want to trot out there every single week as a low-end QB1 that you just plug and play every week. But as a streamer, I do believe he's going to be someone that's going to pop off more than some think.
Well, me being Mr. Superflex, I've got my eye on him very closely because I believe this is a great value as a second quarterback because there's nothing but upside, and you've seen, as you were alluding to, the good Carson Wentz before in his career. Yep. You've seen it. It's happened. I mean, this was a very good quarterback. People forget before the ACL, and even 2 years ago, took a team to the playoffs. And it ended poorly when I'm getting knocked out of the game, like physically knocked out of the game with a concussion. But still, I mean, they're a playoff team. And he was a guy who was just lighting it up. And I think this is a great opportunity for him to get out of the media market of Philadelphia too, which is historically very tough. The fan base is tough. Everything's tough there in Philadelphia. I know, I lived there for quite some time. But speaking of tough, we got Jonathan Taylor along with him. We've got a lot of guys here that other defenses are going to have to deal with. Now, Jonathan Taylor obviously is an RB1, but I know you've got some real feelings about Taylor in terms of his ADP, where he is being taken in the first round, somewhere in the top 7-8 picks, give or take, depending on what the format is you're playing. And I think you have some concerns there more than some other people. So I think it's good because we've heard a lot of positivity about Taylor. I don't want to say negativity, but what are some of the pitfalls regarding him that you think people are ignoring?
That's what it really comes down to. Jonathan Taylor, I don't want to say that he's going to be a bust because he's a really good football player. And I've said that. And he was someone that I was really high on last year, saying, again, that he was the discounted Nick Chubb. If you wanted to wait and grab him, he was the discounted one. Now this year, as oddly as it sounds, I want Nick Chubb a full round later. You're getting Nick Chubb, who's arguably a better running back than Jonathan Taylor, with a solid offensive line in front of him in an offense that was only getting better as the year went on. I kind of like Nick Chubb. Now, he's in more of a timeshare with Kareem Hunt, but let's not pretend that the Colts didn't re-sign Marlon Mack, that they still don't have Nyheim Hines in the roster, that Jordan Wilkins is not going to get a few carries here and there. They're going to space this out a little bit. I think people are forgetting what it was like to have Jonathan Taylor last year for most of the year. They just remember the end, and it was all great. But in my opinion, I would much rather take someone else in the first round than the second round. If you want a running back like Jonathan Taylor, take someone like Nick Chubb.
I think the also point you're kind of making, you only realize it in auction leagues, Taylor's going to have a premium on him that maybe somebody like Chubb or Najee Harris doesn't, but those guys can possibly equal his productivity. So if you're an auction league player, keep that in mind, where Taylor, may or may not get drafted fall in there, but in terms of auctions, there's going to be a little bit of a premium because of the hype around him. So it's something to keep in mind. You might have some pivots, sames of bucks, and get similar productivity. Let's go to the wide receivers here. T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman Jr., Parris Campbell, Pascal is still there as well. But for me, I'm looking at Pittman as that guy that kind of got his feet wet a little bit, and I think has all the potential in the world to kind of start to become more of that fantasy relevant wide receiver on a regular basis. T.Y. Hilton did have some games towards the end of the year where I'll look at each other going, oh my goodness, T.Y. Hilton's alive again. What happened? And then Parris Campbell, I keep waiting on Parris Campbell to happen. I'm not sure how that factors in. And then you've of course got Doyle and Mo Alley Cox there as the tight ends too, which historically Carson Wentz has favored those tight ends. So how do you see the passing game kind of flushing itself out here for the Indianapolis Colts?
Well, he's really favored the tight ends and the slot receivers. He loves targeting receivers or pass catchers over the middle of the field. So therefore, I looked at Parris Campbell as someone that, when we started out last year, all we've really seen from Parris Campbell in the lineup was week 1 last year. He had 9 targets, caught 6 balls for 71 yards. That's a big role to play right out of the gate in that game. That was his first game with Phillip Rivers. Now Carson Wentz, it's kind of like a fresh slate with all these wide receivers. Michael Pittman has the body of that prototypical number 1 wide receiver, and I understand why people want to attach themselves to him, but at the same time, this is a team that runs a lot of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, so I don't know if you're going to have that prototypical number 1 wide receiver. You might want to look to Carson Wentz as kind of like we talk, it's one of those analogies we say, there's a lot of different pancakes, and you're trying to choose which one. Instead, take the syrup that's going over the top of them, and that's why I say that Carson Wentz, I do believe, is going to be a streamer in some matchups rather than an every week start. I don't know if any of these wide receivers are going to be reliable producers. I really don't. I just can't see it because I think T.Y. Hilton's not going to just fade away. He didn't re-sign with them to fade away and be, a bench receiver. Parris Campbell, he's someone that we haven't seen a whole lot of. Michael Pittman had an opportunity last year. There were a lot of injuries in that depth chart. He had an opportunity to kind of shine. And again, I know people are going to be like, well, he was a rookie and it takes time. There's a lot of rookies that popped off last year. Look what Brandon Ayuk did with that opportunity when he was finally given it to him. So I don't think that any of them are going to be every single week like reliable fantasy wide receivers. But in terms of value and where they're being drafted right now, Parris Campbell's the best value.
All right. Best pancake tag, since you brought it up, it's clearly banana chocolate chip. I don't know. What your stance is. Where are you going with pancake?
Chocolate chip is fine.
Just chocolate
banana?
chip?
No.
No, banana chocolate chip together. What you do is you wait for the banana. No, this is what you do. You wait bananas to get very ripe when you make banana bread. You do the same thing, but you put them in the pancake batter along with it. Gives it a nice little feel. I'm telling you right now, it's the way to go. If you're listening at home, you got bananas sitting out there, you turn that into chocolate chip banana pancakes. Delicious. Tags has no idea what he's talking about. But he does know what he's talking about when this comes to underwear, because I know Tags is telling me how much he loves his Sheath underwear, which is one of the sponsors of today's show. They're boxers that are designed to keep your balls off your legs. That's right, gentlemen. 3 individual compartments to keep everything down there separate and cool and comfortable. Traditional boxer briefs are barbaric, and they're invented for Neanderthals. Sheath is modern, ergonomic design intended to prevent skin and skin contact for too long durations. They can build up heat and sweat and all the things you don't like down there. So they're an inverted pouch, basically a pouch for your Joey, as they say, to keep you from sticking to your thigh, and it will stop chafing, readjust less, everything's going to be better off, and they were invented by a U.S. Army soldier who came up with the idea for Sheath during his second tour in Iraq. So we're talking about a company created by a hero who's saving your balls. So go to sheathunderwear.com/fantasypros for 20% off of your order today. That's SHEATH underwear.com/fantasypros. And make sure to use that promo code fantasypros at checkout. Again, that's sheathunderwear.com/fantasypros. 20% off. Thanks to us here at Fantasy Pros. So, Tags, let's shift gears here to another team and another pouch, if we will. And let's talk about another team here, because the Tennessee Titans certainly, 2 years here, a very good run for the Titans. Derrick Henry's all-world. Let's start with him because he's the focal point of the offense. Derrick Henry is a freak of nature, and I understand the workload. You can go back and look at similar workloads to similar guys, but I don't think there's a similar guy out there to comp what Derrick Henry is physically. Plus, he wasn't used out of the gate in his career the way many other running backs were. I think he's at least good enough for 1 year, maybe 2. But let's talk about short and long-term Derrick Henry in redraft and then in keeper situations, because I can understand the workload being a concern, but yet again, he is the focal point. He is the point getter in this offense.
Oh, no, for sure. I mean, you do have to worry about something changes up top with Arthur Smith going. What does that mean for the offense? It's really difficult to say. We don't know if Arthur Smith was the reason that this offense was so highly efficient. It's not to say that, he's the only reason, because coaches can only do so much. The players have to actually, go through with it and produce. Ryan Tannehill, fantastic. He broke efficiency the last couple of years. Derrick Henry, again, fantastic. But do we see those numbers dialed back a little bit? The defense seems to be taking a step back. Are they going to allow more points? Does that mean less rushing attempts, more passing attempts for this Titans team overall? I do believe that Derrick Henry should be a little bit more involved in the passing game. Does that happen this year, especially knowing that they lost Jonnu Smith, that they lost Corey Davis, that they don't have a whole lot of wide receivers right now? And I say right now because they're tied to Julio Jones in some of these trade rumors, that they could be one of the teams in on Julio Jones. But Derrick Henry, if you're a contender in a dynasty league right now, you don't trade him away. If you are a team that you understand you're definitely at least a year away, I would look to maximize the production on him. Yeah, because if you wait until after this season, people are going to start looking at his age. They're going to start looking at his contract winding down and a potential out that the Titans have. So it really just depends on where your roster is at right now. But he should be a producer for at least this year and maybe one more, because a running back like him, how long can he take that beating? How many times can he carry the ball 300-400 times? So it's just, especially with the added game on the season, did they start managing his workload a little bit more? They did draft Darrington Evans to kind of be a timeshare back. Not to say he's going to take a whole lot, but yeah, Derrick Henry, I think there's reasons to be excited about him this year, because I would expect for us to see him involved in the passing game a little bit more.
I think that's also the key to keeping him healthy long term, is because when you don't have him running up against defensive tackles, but instead running over safeties and running over corners and guys like that, trying to tackle this guy out in space, and linebackers that just can't bring him down anyway, I think that's the key, is kind of lessen that contact at the line of scrimmage for Derrick Henry. And maybe that's the difference of this offense without Arthur Smith. Maybe it is getting him more involved in that passing game, which has good long-term effects potentially for his value. Let's talk about A.J. Brown, because I know he's a favorite of both of ours. I was laughing last year when everybody consensus wanted to tell me about, well, he's just super efficient. And I kept saying, that's a bad thing? I don't understand. Explain it to me like I'm a moron, how efficiency is a bad thing. Well, you didn't catch a football enough. Yeah, but every time he caught it, something good happened, right? And that's the whole point. And yes, the volume did increase a little bit, and the efficiency stayed. So as long as that continues to grow in that pattern, Tags, what's not to like about A.J. Brown?
I mean, when you start breaking down and doing projections like I do, I've done my first set and I look at A.J. Brown and it's like, I don't know how this guy doesn't get a minimum 25% target share, which is elite territory.
And style of play. That's it's coaching. It's Vrabel's concept. That's it. That's the only reason, I think.
Well, that's the thing is Vrabel's the like defensive mind on the team. He's not running the offense. So it's you have to think like, where do these targets go? I mean, realistically, Ryan Tannehill is a guy that has somewhat spread the ball around, but it looks that way more so because there's been limited pass attempts. They're not throwing the ball a whole lot. But again, with the new offensive coordinator now, I do think that this is going to change things for them. I think you're going to see more pass attempts in combination with the fact that the defense takes a step back because they're just not a very talented bunch. They're still trying to figure that defense out, the mixing and matching the players. They don't really have a great edge rush. Up the middle of the defense, Jeffrey Simmons is really good, but there's some question marks in this team, right? They're especially on the defense. So you're going to see some increased pass attempts, which should lead to A.J. Brown netting a minimum, I would say minimum 135 targets this year, and I would say as high as 160. So you're looking in this territory where it's rare air to get wide receivers in that territory. So I've moved him all the way up in my rankings to wide receiver 5.
Well, Dupree should go a little way to help that pass rush. You would hope. As long as he's healthy.
You definitely hope so. But I was never a fan of Harold Landry. There's a bunch of ifs. Cornerback talent's there, but again, they're young players. We haven't seen them perform at a high level just yet. So there are question marks, especially in the secondary, aging a little bit. So I don't know. This Titans team is weird because I obviously inherited them moving to Tennessee, where I want the best for them because I want a team to root for. But I'm really curious to see how this team is going to operate without Arthur Smith, calling the plays, because I think things are going to change more than people realize.
All right, well, so let's look at what's left right now, because what's left is Josh Reynolds, what's left is Anthony Firkser, what's left is Ryan Tannehill. Let's be honest. And Tannehill was a guy that can rush for touchdowns too. He showed that certainly last year, and I don't know how much. Like what he benefits from is the attention Derrick Henry gets along the goal line, and so all of a sudden you can roll him out the other way. Cause a little misdirection. Next thing you know, Tannehill's wide open, just kind of running the ball in the end zone himself. Do you see that trend continuing? Because if so, that keeps him right on that precipice of low-end QB1, high-end QB2.
It can, but I think that there's a point where you start taking away enough weapons from a quarterback, and all of a sudden they can't help but produce lower numbers. You know what I mean? Where no matter how good the quarterback is, he needs some playmakers. Outside of A.J. Brown in the passing game, I don't know if they have that guy. I believe Josh Reynolds is the definition of just a guy. Behind him, I mean, Des Fitzpatrick. I don't know. The draft pick itself made no sense to me, but the Titans, if they're high on him, whatever. Anthony Firkser, he's been a timeshare tight end. He's more of like a wide receiver than he is a tight end. So it's really weird to try and figure that out. So Ryan Tannehill, while I think that I think he's a fantastic number 2 quarterback in Superflex, obviously. But
I love him there. I think it's not an indictment on him so much as also you've got Joe Burrow back healthy. You've got Trevor Lawrence. You got all these young quarterbacks too. They're really you're very excited about. You're seeing real potential with, and I think that also hurts his draft stock in Superflex as well.
Right, but the thing is with me is I think since Ryan Tannehill became the starter, midway through 2019, during that time. If you start fantasy scoring right there and go all the way through the 2020 season, so it's about a season and a half, Ryan Tannehill, the only quarterback who scored more fantasy points in that time than Ryan Tannehill, is Lamar Jackson. That is it. Not Patrick Mahomes, not Josh Allen. No. That's it. Lamar Jackson's the only one. So he's been undervalued by the fantasy community, but now is the point where it's like people are going to say, well, do we keep riding this? And I'm exercising a little bit of caution just because, again, they've taken away a lot of talent.
It's funny because you and I have done the same thing. I had some caution with Tannehill, too. It's the first time in a year where I haven't had him as a QB1. He's right outside of that grouping for me. And, look, it's just, I think you're right. I think you've taken too much away where the overall scoring is in question of that team. And that's something to keep in mind. Let's talk about the biggest change to the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is new head coach, before we even get into the players and get into that. Because I know you got all the feels, as the kids like to say, about Urban Meyer. And I think you and I have the same. We go into things with an open mind. We say we want to see how things are going. How's that mind doing now? Is it open? Is it closing? What's happening to Urban Meyer and tags in his brain?
It's trending in the wrong direction. I don't like it when coaches try and force players into a certain specific direction or role just to fit what they want them to do, rather than saying, what does this player do well and how can I incorporate that in my offense? And, since he's taken over the head coach, he hired a strength and conditioning coach that had some serious off-the-field question marks that never should have been hired. Then he goes and he drafts a running back in the first round, which is like, Dude, it's not great to draft a running back in the first round, but then go on to say, oh, we're going to make him a wide receiver. Okay, now you're going to take this guy and put him out of position. Okay, he's a good receiver. Don't get me wrong, Travis Etienne is, but again, you don't draft. You're drafting him out of position, and you're saying I'm drafting a wide receiver. Okay, he apparently wanted to draft Kadarius Toney, which makes me even more concerned. And then he goes and he signs Tim Tebow as a tight end, a guy that couldn't make it at quarterback, a guy that couldn't make it in the NFL, and he goes to play baseball, and now he comes back over 30 years old as a tight end, a position that he's never played. Did you see the target that Tim Tebow got with the Jets? It literally hit him in the face mask. Tim Tebow, great guy, for all that stuff.
And loyalty is nice too, but I also like reality.
But you're running an NFL team. Like, right. Act like it, okay? This is not college. This is not Florida.
Well, that's what all these college coaches seem to have a problem with, is they don't understand that this level, that kind of stuff doesn't fly in what you're doing. I mean, what you're doing is you're just setting bad precedents more than anything. Like, at the end of the day, this is not going to matter. Yep. It's getting a lot of media attention, way more than it should. But it's setting a bad precedent, which is decision-making, and questionable decision-making at that. I think that's a thing we're trying to figure out. And look, We're going to go through this Jacksonville roster because there are some fantasy pieces there that I think are very exciting. But before we do, I want to let you guys know about something that's fantastic, which is the Perfect Practice mat. And that is trusted by, obviously, more than 100 tour pros, including Masters champion Dustin Johnson. So, what I'm telling you guys is this. You got an opportunity here. Father's Day is coming right around the corner. The Perfect Practice putting mat is the perfect gift for all the dads in your life. Go to perfectpractice.golf and use the code FantasyPros to get 15% off your order. Again, that's perfectpractice.golf and use the code FantasyPros for 15% off and get that Perfect Practice mat for all your putts. And take it from me, I know something about putts. All right, so let's move on here to Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, this guy who is, the can't-miss prospect, the best quarterback prospect in a generation, possibly, as he's been described, and I think rightfully so. What are your expectations in year one for him out of the gate? Obviously, we know he's going to start week one and all of that. We saw Joe Burrow do it. We've seen some other quarterbacks here come in lately and just kind of start from day one, the Kyler Murrays of the world, to mixed success. What's your expectation this year for Trevor Lawrence?
Oh, it would have been higher.
Give me the high and the low. Like, where you everything works out, he finishes a QB what? Everything fails, he still finishes a QB what?
Well, I mean, if everything, in an ideal world, like he would throw like Justin Herbert did last year, come in and throw for 4,000 plus yards, throw for, almost 30 touchdowns. And he would rush for 400 to 500 yards and a handful of touchdowns as well. And I think that is in the realm of possibilities. But again, it all comes back to Urban Meyer and not really understanding what he's doing, if he's going to try and turn this into his offense rather than saying that you're going to build around the strengths of players. So Lawrence is the type of quarterback who should make the head coach look better than he actually is. Like Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre did for Mike McCarthy for a long time. Do the Jaguars realize that, or do they realize that he's holding him back? I think that Urban Meyer is the one person that could hold back Trevor Lawrence from having a true breakout season, but I do believe that he is a breakout candidate and should be taken. I think that you can draft Trevor Lawrence in a redraft format with one of the final few picks, put him on the end of your bench as your QB2 and see what you have right away, because you're going to find out immediately. This Jaguars defense is not in the position to stop anybody. They're a work in progress, I'll say, because they have added some talent, especially on the back end, but there should be plenty of pass attempts to be had with him on this team that is projected to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. So, and if he gets that mobility, that can carry you. Can he be a Jalen Hurts type quarterback? That Jalen Hurts was towards the end of 2020. Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about who the beneficiaries are of the potential passing game here. Laviska Shenault, a lot of people are high on. DJ Chark, I know I'm a big fan. I think he's a very good route runner. I think he's very underrated. Had some really good performances, despite the fact he was playing with Gardner Minshew most of the time. And then you've got Marvin Jones, the old man coming in there with a lot of, I got to tell you, I think he's somebody that's really kind of not getting enough attention in this potentially. I think it's important to have somebody who's been there and done that as long as Marvin Jones has. So where do you want to put your fantasy stock with these three wideouts?
This one is so difficult. I mean, you have to think that DJ Chark is the number one. You say that because he's flashed number one potential in the NFL. Like, he's already flashed the ability to be the go-to guy. Laviska Shenault was drafted as someone that dealing with a core injury, muscle injury last offseason, had surgery, played, but he was kind of on and off the field throughout. And then you bring in Marvin Jones this is a new coaching staff. So Obviously, them bringing in Marvin Jones is a big deal. Marvin Jones is not going to go play for an NFL team to sit on the bench. So he's coming in. I do think he's going to play right away. So you start thinking about it, and you're like, all right, how is this going to work out? They're talking about Travis Etienne is like a slot-type receiver, and it's like the one person that I was kind of excited about because there was a little bit of unknown, but now I'm a little bit hesitant on, is Laviska Shenault. Does he get the playing time that people thought he was going to get? Because right now he's being drafted as a top 45 wide receiver in redraft formats. For a guy that might be the number 3 wide receiver on the depth chart, maybe even 4 if they actually do use Etienne as a slot receiver, that's problematic, especially in an Urban Meyer offense that we don't foresee to be extremely efficient. So this is turning into one of those situations, kind of like the Colts, where we don't really know. It's a fresh slate for all these wide receivers because, Trevor Lawrence doesn't have a favorite coming in outside of maybe Travis Etienne.
Well, let's talk about that because maybe Etienne is the favorite and maybe he becomes that focal point of the offense, and it all just carries over because of the comfortability factor, because of speaking the same language, because when you're in the huddle with guys and you've won with guys, you trust them, you have timing, you have rapport, you have all that stuff. Yeah. I'm out on James Robinson this year, which breaks my heart because he was a great story last year. I love the undrafted free agent guys, love to root for him, but he's not part of this regime, and Etienne is Lawrence's guy, and for that reason, I'm just out. Yeah. Which sounds very Shark Tank, the way I'm kind of saying all these things that I'm out, but I'm out. I'm out on Robinson. And it's tough, but I think Etienne really has an opportunity here, especially as the season goes on, to continue to be more and more of that focal point, and maybe it is to the detriment of those wide receivers.
Yeah, no, I think that we have to factor that in as a possibility, right? We'll see when the preseason comes around, because with a new coach, I think you have to get these players in the field, and you have to get them used to your offense. So we're probably going to see how they're planning on utilizing them right out of the gate. Now, that can change as the year goes on, but I'm with you in the fact that James Robinson I'm out. Travis Etienne is a good running back too. You draft him as a wide receiver or whatever the hell they did. He's a good running back too. What I love about him is that, everybody talks about 40-yard dash speed and this and that, and it's a waste. It really is. It's the stupidest conversation because how often does a running back get a straight line where they're running 40 yards? They don't. What you see with Travis Etienne though on film is you see a player that gets up to speed immediately. Like he doesn't, it's not ramped up speed. It's not worried about anything. Like he gets
acceleration.
The ball, he wants to move downhill, and he has this burst, and that's the best part about him as a running back. And obviously him being utilized as a receiver is a great thing. People want to make it out that's a pet peeve of mine, Joe. People are making it out to be a bad thing that Travis Etienne is going to be used as a receiver.
It's worked out terribly for Alvin Kamara catching 80 balls a year.
Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey.
Oh boy, I hate those PPR wide running backs that just catch the ball. All purpose. Shucks, what a terrible thing. Speaking of so bad, how about the Texans? Let's move on there. Oh boy. This is going to be rough. Brace yourselves. Let's start with Deshaun Watson because there's different versions here to kind of figure out, and not getting too much into the weeds here. What I'm going to say is this. I do believe Deshaun Watson is going to play football again. I'm not sure if it's going to be for the Texans. I don't know how much football he's going to play in 21. So rather than even speculate on that, I think it's more important for us to say long-term, what are we looking at for Deshaun Watson? Because you see in these startup dynasties, especially in these like Superflex leagues where Watson's ADP is just rock bottom, and I understand it. At what point do you start trying to take a shot? Because Deshaun Watson is a franchise player, and we all know this, despite guys who have had problems in the NFL, if you're a franchise player, top talent, you get that second chance. We all know they do.
It's a weird situation right now because the way that the media covers things today, it's under such a microscope, and I think it's putting teams in a tougher position than ever to say, hey, if you trade for this guy, it's going to be a PR nightmare, and you have to have a plan in place of how to do that. And I think major media markets are going to have trouble doing that. So you might look at a team, you and I were discussing off the air about, the Raiders potentially being that team that takes a chance on him because, we've heard Gruden and Mayock being willing to take chances on reclamation guys that have had some off the field issues. We've heard about Brian Flores, thinking he can help people off the field.
And I think it matters what city. And that's why I think the Raider conversation is so interesting because Las Vegas is Las Vegas. Right. It's a very different environment. Yeah.
I don't know if Houston ever gets the value they want to in a trade.
They might never. You know what? They might never. It might just be the move they have to do and just kind of clear the slate, unfortunately.
But if they never get the offer, that's the problem, right? Is that and Deshaun Watson, if he wants to play football, you might have to play for the Texans.
Yeah, or at least for part of this year you do. Running backs there, David Johnson, Phillip Lindsay, and then we've got the wide receivers, Brandin Cooks, Randall Cobb, and Kiki QT with Tyrod Taylor apparently playing quarterback to start the year. That would be our guess as we're kind of sitting here right now doing this in May. The problem I have, once again, is kind of go back to the bigger meta idea about offenses. I don't love this offense. I don't love this roster. It's one of the worst rosters in football in terms of construction, in terms of depth. You've lost Deshaun Watson, your franchise, you know, at least for the short term, and you've lost your locker room leader in J.J. Watt. I think with a new coach, everything that's going on here, this to me just feels like a bad investment. But are you seeing anyone that you could cherry pick from this group in the Texans that you have at least thoughts of, well, I like him at this cost potentially?
I mean, the one player that I think I would consider is Brandin Cooks. And I say Brandin Cooks because here's a stat I got for you, Joe. Over the last 6 years, there have only been 7 wide receivers who have finished as a top 24 wide receiver 5 or more times. Those wide receivers are Julio Jones, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, Jarvis Landry, and Brandin Cooks.
Probably 12 games worth of production because he's that all or nothing guy. Like, he's had monstrous games.
But he's done it with different quarterbacks. Like, he's done it with Breeze, he's done it with Brady, he's done it with Goff, and it's like Deshaun Watson. And you know, there's some elite quarterbacks in that tier, but he also did it with Jared Goff for a little bit there too. So we obviously know what Jared Goff is at this point. So Brandin Cooks, I guess, but at the same time, it feels dirty to roster anybody on this Texans roster, including David Johnson. David Johnson's probably going to get 13 to 15 touches per game, which does have value as a flex type play. But Phillip Lindsay's no scrub. Like, he's a solid running back. They also got Mark Ingram, so this is just
Lindsay's that guy for me. Lindsay's that guy that I feel like Phillip Lindsay's unbelievable. Every time, nobody wants him to succeed. And all he does every time he gets the ball is succeed.
He's
and
good.
I think
he's a good
he
football
is good.
player. Yeah.
And I just don't understand. And, David Johnson, I know, was kind of steady but uninspiring last year. I know they're burning Mark Ingram. He looks done. But Lindsay's that guy that in a deeper league, when you're looking for more running back depth, I would kind of circle. That's the one guy I was like, all right, let's go there. Before we get out of here, we're going to give you a sleeper, a bust, and a breakout from the AFC South. So I'll go first here with my sleeper. I'm going to go with old man Marvin Jones. That's right. Everyone's talking about Laviska Shenault. Everybody's talking about DJ Chark. What about the old man? The old man who's getting the job done year in, year out in Detroit. And now he's got Trevor Lawrence throwing the football. That seems pretty good. And I think he might be able to teach the kids a thing or two. So I love the free square of Marvin Jones in drafts right now. And I think it's all about return on investment. How about you, Tax? Who's your sleeper?
My sleeper is Parris Campbell. I'm sticking with that as a sleeper because he's someone you can get with one of your final picks in a draft right now. Again, one game in 2020. With Phillip Rivers and 9 targets, 6 catches, 71 yards. Michael Pittman hit those numbers exactly once in 2020, and that was without Parris Campbell on the field. So I do like Parris Campbell. I think he matches up with Carson Wentz's skill set. And the best part about it all, you're going to know exactly what you have right when the year starts, and you need players like that on your roster. Those are the best sleepers because, again, after week 1, you're going to know exactly what you have.
I'm going to have my Michael Pittman revenge later in a second. First, let's do bust. The entire Texans team. That's it. That's my bust. The whole team, I really want nothing to do with him. Maybe Phillip Lindsay very late. Maybe Brandin Cooks if he falls off the face of the earth. Because Tyrod Taylor's capable. Yeah. But I just think this team has all sorts of problems that we haven't even, putting it all together on the field, new coach, new quarterback, all that media circus around it. It is a bad scene. I'm out on the Texans. Who's your bust?
My bust is James Robinson. If you were to go back to last year and talk about when Le'Veon Bell joined the Chiefs, do you remember Clyde Edwards-Helaire in terms of like you couldn't play him with any confidence? It was like an RB3 and it was a very boring RB3. So what people don't know, they talk about James Robinson in a very nice fashion. They say he was great last year and this and that. It was a lot of touches. If you look at it, Clyde Edwards-Helaire averaged 4.44 yards per carry. James Robinson, 4.45 yards per carry. It's the number of touches that he was getting every single week. So when you see those touches dip down and come back down to earth, I think it's going to be rough for James Robinson to get 10 to 12 touches per week this year. And therefore, he's going to be someone like a Devin Singletary, where you can't... They just
you can't start him because of the unknown.
They clog your roster, and there's nothing you can get unless there's an injury. If there's an injury to Travis Etienne, I'm going to treat James Robinson kind of like a handcuff, and I think he's a valuable handcuff. So I think he belongs probably on RB35 range. RB35. I'll say that. But he's going to be drafted before then. His current ADP in best ball formats is RB28. So people are overdrafting him by a round, if not 2 rounds. So he's the bust that I don't want on any of my rosters.
All right, last one's the breakout here. I'm going to go with Michael Pittman Jr. That's right. To heck with all the Parris Campbell shares the Tags wants. I want Michael Pittman Jr. instead. I did see the flashes, and I do think a little bit more time to grow, and having Carson Wentz there is going to be good for him and good for Carson Wentz. So who's your breakout here, Tags, to close things out?
I'm going to go with Travis Etienne as the breakout. Just because, while talking through this and trying to figure everything out, it's, having him as a receiver is definitely not a bad thing. I've done studies on rookie running backs, and they're once they come into the NFL, first round running backs over the last, I think, 8 years, they average, I think it's 240 touches per season. In fact, there's only been one first-round running back who did not total at least 197 touches as a rookie, and that was Rashad Penny, which we all know was a terrible draft pick when they made it. So Travis Etienne, going to be used right away, going to be used in the passing game, which targets are worth more than carries anyway. So Travis Etienne is the breakout star.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with that. You know how much I love Travis Etienne, so much that I'm already past the breakout. I'm already into the buying in. So there you go. And you got him in the mock yesterday with Sealy. So
there you go.
And you were unhappy, and I was happy for you. I'm trying to convince you, but
I felt like it was a little early. But
sometimes you got to do these things, Tags. Especially, he is going to have to catch the football so much. What a shame. All right, I want to thank our sponsors again at today's show. Once again, Perfect Practice Putting Mat. Go to perfectpractice.golf and use the code FantasyPros to get 15% off your order. And don't forget about Sheath Underwear as well. We talked about that too. Compartments for all your pieces. That's what you want. Sheathunderwear.com/FantasyPros for 20% off your order today. Again, that's SHEATH underwear.com/FantasyPros. And remember, you can get that Calvin Ridley autographed jersey. Go to FantasyPros.com/contest for more details about that. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Tags, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our featured videos as well. Also, make sure to click that red subscribe button to get notified when we post videos in the future.